Hey guys, it's Nolly from GGD here, and I'm really excited because we have a new drum sample library to show you, and that's something that we get really excited about here at GGD. It's the new Periphery 4 Matt Halpern signature library. So this is a drum instrument that we created during the actual recording process of Periphery's latest album, Periphery 4 Hail Stan. But it's not some mere afterthought that we tacked on the end. It's actually the deepest sample instrument that we've done to date with GGD. So I think it's an absolutely incredible sound, and I can't wait to dive into it. So let's take a little look here, and I'm going to run you through some of the kind of production things that went into this, as well as a kind of just improvised walkthrough of the product so you can get an idea of what it's all about. So first off, hopefully you'll notice it's got an absolutely beautiful GUI. This is by far the best graphics we've had on any GGD product to date, and we're really proud of that. The kit itself I'd describe as kind of medium to large. It's not the largest kit, it's not as big as, say, the Invasion was, but it's still a really decent array of cymbals and toms to get you through pretty much any kind of setup you might need. The core of this kit is Matt's amazing Pearl reference kit that he had custom made right before this session. So this was actually pretty much his first outing, pretty much brand new out of the boxes. What I've got set up here is just a very minor variation on the kit that initializes when you open up the plugin, because this is the actual setup that we used for the majority of the recording process of Periphery 4 Hail Stan. And really the only difference is in the toms. You'll notice you've got 2 rack tom slots. When we recorded the album, we actually only used 1 rack tom, this large 13 here. However, when we did the sampling, we decided to take it a step further and also offer 10 and 12 rack toms, so you can have a slightly more conventional kind of prog layout there as well. So let's just dive in. I'm just going to click around a little bit so you can get an idea of some of the core tones here with this stock setup. And then while I'm at it, I'll change the toms over to the default 10-12 layout so you can hear the difference there too. Cool, so hopefully you get the idea there that it's a really clean, kind of polished, just beautiful sounding studio drum kit. These are the exact raw tones that we used when we recorded Periphery 4, and they will do that easily. It takes very little processing to get this to the kind of sound that appears on the record, but it's also a really flexible studio sound that I think you'll find uses for probably outside the world of metal even, and it's become my go-to library when I'm doing any kind of writing of my own. Since it was based around Matt's actual recording kit, we didn't go crazy with the options of drums and cymbals, so it's really just focused around the actual drums that we used during the session. I'll show you some of the variations we've got though. So the main snare that loads up is this incredible VK cast bronze snare. Now, if you haven't heard of VK drums, I'd suggest you go and Google them, and their cast bronze snares are, I mean, it's laughable how heavy they are. They're these absolutely solid chunks of bronze with bronze hoops. It's an absolute powerhouse of a snare, and we used it for the majority of the record. And we kind of let it be tuned in a kind of mid-range tuning that would be, equally aggressive and fat sounding, really. So it's a great all-purpose snare. But we also used Pearl reference brass snare. This is, by most people's standards, a really heavy snare, although not quite as heavy as the VK. And we tuned this one up really high. You can hear it on the song Sentient Glow, for example. That's going to be really cool for funk or aggressive styles, or well, just anyone who likes a really nice poppy snare. And then there's this Pearl Sensitone brass snare as well, which this is kind of a slightly more old school vibe, and we use this tuned low with a bit more ring to it, and you can hear that, for example, on the song Church Burner. That could be like a huge sounding rock snare for kind of rock ballads or anything which you want that like big, punchy, wet sounding snare drum. There's a choice of kick drums, so we've got this main 22-inch kick drum, which is the one that we used on the record. But when we were sampling, we also came across in the studio they had this old Pearl Masters Maple 24-inch bass drum, so it's a bigger bass drum. And it's just got this amazing sounding kind of knocky character to it. And I actually ended up using a little bit of the sample of that bass drum blended with the 22 on the record. So we thought it'd be cool to give you guys both of those. This is the 22 first. It's quite a drastic difference, and I think it's really cool. Between those two options, you can cover a lot of ground indeed. As I mentioned too, this is the most deep sampled kit that we've done, so there's more dynamic layers to play with than ever before. If you try using these at lower velocities, you'll find they're actually really quite versatile, because we did sample them at kind of every graduation you can imagine. In terms of the toms, we've already been over that layout. The cymbals are mainly fixed, so the crashers, the two left crashers, the splashers, hats, and China, those you can disable them, or you can have the option that we actually used on the record. So however, there is a choice of rides between this really lovely kind of heavy bell ride that we use for the majority of the record and a very, very dry and kind of lo-fi sounding ride that we used on certain parts of the record too. So that alone gives you quite a lot of sonic versatility. The right crash, we alternated between a couple on the record. We've got a 19-inch Byzance medium thin or a 19-inch MB20 heavy crash, which is a bit higher pitched and a bit more kind of aggressive sounding. It loads up with the Byzance first. They're both absolutely killer crashes, and the Byzance in particular is Matt's go-to crash. We've used it on most of the Periphery records to date, and it'll be quite a familiar sound to listeners of Periphery and users of GGD as well. And then finally, the stack has the option of being flipped inverted. This is Matt's signature double down stack. You can either use it the way up as it appears in the graphic there, or you can flip it over and put the crash on top of the China, and it sounds a lot drier and kind of tighter that way. I think it's really cool you've got these little splashes. You can do some really interesting stuff with those, as Matt did on the record. And there's also this pair of mini hats here, which we've never had anything quite like that on a GGD record before. That's really cool, because you can do cool things between the closed hats and that little mini hat there. So that's pretty much all of the drums and cymbals that are on offer here. I feel like although this selection doesn't have that many options, the actual inherent sounds themselves are really versatile, and the way they're being recorded are going to mean you can get a lot out of this in a lot of different musical contexts. So let's take a look now at the rest of the parts of this instrument here. So when I go to the kick channel, you'll see there's only 3 faders here, and what we've always done with GGD is to offer the close mic, the overheads, and the room channels for each instrument independently on one page, so that you can really dial in that balance in a way that you can't do in real life. I mean, you can't choose, oh, I want a little bit less kick drum in the room channel when the drummer's actually playing, because he's the only one in control of volume there. So it's really nice to be able to have that level of kind of hyper-realism right at your fingertips without having to go into extra menus and stuff. You might notice there's only one set of room channels, and if you are a fan of the Modern and Massive pack that we released, we also offered 2 pairs of overheads here. So this is more stripped down in terms of the recording, but it's because it's true to the way that we actually recorded the record. So I didn't want to go over the top with microphone inputs. I know exactly the sounds that I want to extract from the kit. And that room that we recorded in, which is the incredible sounding Magpie cage in Baltimore, it's so big and dense and reverberant that it doesn't. I've found in the past, I've tried putting mics around in different spots there, and to be honest, it always has a very similar character. So we just found what I thought was the best balance of dry and reflected sounds in the room, and we just rolled with that single stereo pair, and that's what you've got here. I think you'll agree it's a really great sound. So here you can adjust the level of the close mics, which is a blend of 3 different microphones, which I've kind of figured out. So I'll show you what that sounds like on its own. It's quite nice and dry. That's going to be a really good kick, I think, for especially like heavy rock stuff, where you're really going to have that huge bass drum sound. Show what it sounds like in the overheads. So of course it's a bit tilted off to the right just because I always do the overhead, so the snare's dead in the middle. The kick drum naturally goes a little bit off to the right, but never is an issue in the actual mix. And then the room channels, I think this is where you'll really appreciate how big it sounds. Yeah, it's just a killer sounding room, that one. Let's go over to the snare. So here, again, quite a simple miking setup. We've got top, bottom, overheads and room. Let's go to the VK because I love that one. These are the close mics on their own. And then the overheads and room on their own. And I think it's always with the snare drum that a room really kind of earns its keep, because that decay on the snare is absolutely huge. I love it. When we're standing in the room with the drums there, it's shocking how much low end bounces around in that room in a really pleasing way. You know, even if Matt just hits like a closed hi-hat from a few meters in front of the kit, you get this like blast of power. It's odd. I've not really felt that in another room, and I think it really comes across in the mic tracks here. Same thing basically through all of these channels. I'll just go to the cymbals where you've got absolutely loads of fader channels, because we recorded spot mics on everything bar the crashes. So you've got spot mics for your hat, your ride, china, the two little splashes, the mini hat, the stack as well. So you can really refine the balance and bring out the splashes and, you know, things like the mini hats. The stack, when it's inverted, gets quite a lot more quiet, so you might find you want to push in a bit more of the spot mic. However, you can also use this pretty cool function on the cymbal mixer part of the settings page here. You can actually adjust the relative balance of every cymbal in the overhead. So you're kind of adjusting the volume of the cymbal in the overheads independently of each other. So this is another moment of hyper-realism. You just can't do this in real life. But it can be really cool. Let's say, I don't know, you want a bit more of splashes, but you don't want them in that kind of close mic sound. You can push them up on these faders here, or in the rooms, or pull down the hi-hats in the room, whatever it is you might be needing in your context. So that's a really powerful part, actually, this cymbal mixer page. Just skipping back a second to some of the other things you've got going on the mixer. You've got mute, solo, and polarity inversion. You've got panning on the mono tracks, and then the stereo tracks, so the overheads and room, have a spread control. So that's actually allowing you to push the stereo field wider or narrower. This can be really cool on something like the snare. If you want the explosiveness of the snare to kind of shoot out to the sides a bit more rather than staying focused in the middle, you can do it on that spread control there. So that's why we've done that. You also have an AHD, like attack, hold, and decay, or ADSR you might know it as, controls here. I find these to be really useful, especially on the toms. Basically, to explain, it allows you to shape the envelope of the sound. So if you have the attack on full, it's not doing anything, it's just the raw sound. As you start to pull it down, it starts to feel like it's fading in instead of cutting in. I'll show you what that would sound like. So, as opposed to at an extreme setting. And then you can use the hold and decay functions to adjust the hold, like how long it sustains its full volume, and then decay is like a kind of fade out on the end. Now, I'm talking about this because one thing with this particular kit is that those floor toms have absolutely huge sustain, and it's wicked. There's plenty of moments where it's super cool to have a really lovely, huge sustain coming off your drums. However, in a mix, you might want to get something a bit closer to well, with real drums, it's very normal to gate your toms to prevent there being too much bleed from the cymbals coming through and stuff, but it also has the effect of tightening up the sustain in the drum, so you get like a little blast of low end when a floor tom's hit, and then it fades away quite quickly. And you can approximate that here using these AHD controls. So I'll play it to you on full. But if I then bring these down a little bit, well, yeah, maybe a bit extreme there. You can use that to just kind of neatly tuck away the sustain of the toms a tiny bit there. So I'll do that to both the floor toms. As opposed to I think we counted like 8 or 9 seconds of sustain coming off that floor tom when we were when we were sampling at the 18. So HD is super useful in this one. And then finally, as we've had since Modern and Massive, there are turbo controls at your disposal. So for people that don't know about the turbo control, what it allows you to do is blend in some under the hood processing, which I've dialed in to make the drums sound a little bit more kind of just ready to go into the mix. Yeah, it's really cool if you want to have your drum mix come out of our drum software sounding really quite final in a way that means you can crack on with some songwriting or demoing, or just use it, as part of your mix template without having to go heavy on plugins and processing after the fact. I mean, I think this pack, perhaps more than ever, sounds really good just out of the box, and it's quite fun to work with it and just mix it quite gently and end up with really powerful but authentic sounding results. However, you've got turbo there should you want it. So if, for example, I show it to you on the snare channel, if I hit the snare now, I'll show you what it sounds like kind of just direct out of the box, and then I'm going to instantiate turbo on all channels. So it goes quite extreme there, and you can actually choose to kind of, tail it back a little bit should you wish. I think particularly on the room, it does a great job of exciting the room. So that's the turbo control, and you've got access to that on every single channel of the mixer. It's different processing that loads up on a lot of these things, and it's drum specific too. So it's really quite detailed. And yeah, you can basically choose how much and on which channels you want to apply this processing. Might be that you don't want any, might be that you want loads. It's entirely up to you. We've also got a dedicated reverb in this plugin, as well as pitch control as well, so you can pitch up and down your drums as you see fit. If you want to pitch down a snare or pitch it way up, you can do that, all using your pitch control over here. Rounding things out, you've got a really comprehensive mappings page here, along with velocity curves and CC learning, and all of the great features that we've packed out into the mapping pages of our products. The actual articulations on offer are quite extensive. As we like to do, we've given you guys, for example, on the snare, you've got regular hits, which are central hits blending into rim shots. And then you've got flams, so that's actually recording flams, because we always think it sounds a little bit different when it's actually performed than when you program it. You can hear each of the snares with the wires off, rough, so little buzz rolls, and also side stick. We recorded some stick clicks, so if you want to kind of cool count into one of your songs. You've got chokes and hits on all the cymbals and splashes, and you've got loads of levels of openness on the hi-hats as well. So it's quite an extensive selection of articulations there to get stuck into. And finally, we've got our groove player, which this one doesn't have any of the MIDI packs loaded up in it, but any of the MIDI packs which we've got on sale, you can load up and play through here. So essentially that's it. That's the GGD Periphery 4 Matt Halpern signature library. I'm really excited about it because I think the range of tones on offer, because of how deeply it's been sampled and how it's been captured, make it genuinely really versatile within the world of rock and metal. I mean, I find it super inspiring, whether it's kind of something you're trying to do that's a bit more ambient rock all the way through to extreme metal. This can totally handle it because the tones are just really flexible and captured in a way that's not overly stylized. It's just a really clean capture of a great sounding kit. So I really hope you guys find it as inspirational as I've done. Thank you so much for the support if you're already a GGD product owner, and if you're not, then I really hope that you can join our community of music creators soon. If you've got any questions, send us a mail at hello@getgooddrums.com, and if you want any more information about the Periphery 4 library or any of our other products, head to www.getgooddrums.com.